Is everybody ready? I guess we'll get started. Introduce myself. My name is Marilyn Plumley, and I'm one of the faculty members here. I'm with the Writing Center in the School of Sciences and Humanities, and I'm a member of the Korean Studies Center faculty. And it's my great pleasure today to introduce to you Maria Olala. Maria, would you please say your last name?
Yeah, Chizhevskaya. I think for my Kazakh friends, it shouldn't sound too bad. Chizhevskaya.
Okay. And I'd like to introduce the director of the Korean Studies Center, Professor Ko Ho-yoon Ko. And one of the Korean language teachers, Professor Cho Yeonju or Yeonju Cho, if depending on how you want to pronounce the name. Yeah, there she is.
안녕하세요.
And welcome to everybody who's here. And we've got a really nice presentation today for you called An Outsider's View of Korea. And Maria is herself Ukrainian Russian. And she graduated with her master's originally from the Kiev International University, majoring in international economic studies, but she did a minor in Korean studies. And then later she's going to explain a little bit about this, but she then later went to Korea, spent the better part of 10 years there, worked in a variety of companies, and has a very interesting perspective on what it is like to work as a foreigner embedded within the Korean business context. And then she also later went to Australia after Korea. She went to Australia and did a certificate of cybersecurity. And she is living here on the campus. I didn't check this with her. She's a faculty spouse, and her husband is also one of the faculty members in the Graduate School of Education. So she's with us here with her adorable children. And so she's around. So if you want to connect with her later after this session, you'll be able to do that. Okay. Oh, we have one person waiting to come in. Right. So Maria, would you like to open your presentation?
Yeah. So let me share my screen. So hello everyone again. My name is Maria. So Asel, you mentioned you're from, I think you said you're from politics, maybe that faculty, and you're
Public administration, actually. Yeah.
Public administration, and you're interested in like an idea of global Korean, how Koreans became global. So I should say maybe disappoint some people who came here. This is not like nothing research, nothing based on research or none of the actual scientific papers. This is my pure subjective, very subjective view of how I saw Koreans becoming more open, more global society, how they developed in front of my eyes and what I experienced subjectively. So none of this has any support, none of this in statistics or literature or anything. This is just my pure view, which is based on my experience. So anyone who doesn't feel like you're interested, you're welcome to, to leave. I won't be offended. So, but for those who want to know the subjective view of someone who lived in Korea, you maybe came to the right place, because I lived in Korea for about 10 years as a student, as an employee, as someone who just a foreigner trying to build up their new life in Korea and trying to build a career. So let's start with actually who am I? Who I am? Who am I is for those who cybersecurity. In cybersecurity, there is a special command which you type and say, who am I, to understand people. So that's how I came up with this name for the slide. So my name is Maria again. I lived in Korea from 2003 to 2011. This is where I came as an employee and lived constantly, not living Korea, just living Korea for a few months, maybe for a few weeks, just for holidays. But before that, in 2011, I came to Korea as a student. So I'm a former Korean student. I'm a former employee of a small business in rural Korea. So you should understand that the Korea that you probably know is more of urban Korea. Urban Korea is a Korea which is coming from big city like Seoul. Seoul is almost Korea because, you know, with 45 population of 48, I think, million people, 22 of them live in Seoul or around Seoul. So it's like Seoul is almost Korea, but you should understand that there is different Korea, which is rural Korea. And I did work in a small business in a rural Korea. Then I moved to Seoul and worked for a global company. And then I'm someone who genuinely admire Korean its people, because I personally have studied a lot. I learned a lot about Korean and about Koreans influence my mentality and who am I, like, in a very positive way. So let's move on. So to the question of how did I get connected to Korea? So I think Barjan, am I pronouncing the name correct? I think you said that you got connected to Korea because you like K-drama, K-pop, all the stuff that comes from Korea and everything. So you should understand that this was not a thing about, I'm scared to say, about 20 years ago. So when I was becoming a student 20 years ago, Korea was there's such things like Korea pop, Korean K-pop, K-drama, K-movies. It didn't exist. So nobody knew this, and choosing a Korean language was really a random choice. Like, people could often ask me how did you come up with choosing Korean language? And it was actually a random choice. I should admit this, because I wanted to go into an international department, and I entered Kyiv International University. And when I was presented with options to choose a language, so the idea is that you study international relations, you have English as a main language, and you need to know second language. And they presented me with a few options to choose, and that was Spanish, Japanese, and Korean. So I said, okay, I have choice. I want to do Spanish. And they said, oh, it's a good choice, but Spanish is for those who didn't study English at school. So they will study English first, and they will catch up with Spanish, because Spanish is easier to learn compared to Japanese or Korean. So what do you choose between two? I thought, okay, Japanese sounds like a good choice. They said, yes, Japanese is a good choice, but Japanese group is full and you can't get in. There is no more spaces for that. So please choose Korean language. I said, well, okay, what can I do? So, but Korea by then already was somewhat not popular, but it was known around, especially in post-Soviet countries, in Kyiv, in Ukraine, for companies like LG, LG, Samsung. LG was called Golden Star back then. There was Dell, Kia, all those companies, and they were bringing new idea of what Korea is. Korea was associated with new development, new businesses, new technologies, and those businesses started coming into Ukraine. So I decided, okay, I chose this language. I'm going to connect my life to this country. So I'm going to study well, and I'll study Korean hard. It probably was lucky, but a good choice, because Korea at the same time also started to jump on a campaign of promoting Korea globally and helping whoever wanted to study Korean language, because back then it was really, really not a popular language, to help whoever wanted to study. So if you tried a little bit harder, you could get any opportunity to go deep and hard, and Koreans were actually quite helpful. So, and Korean embassy was involved. They promoted, they came to the university often. Consular was delivering speeches. They supplied books, textbooks. I can't say anything bad about how Koreans tried to support those who wanted to study Korean language. So, that's how I first ended up to be in Korea as an exchange student. So Korea was running, or still runs, program by KOICA, Korean International Cooperation Agency, I think it's called. And so they developed this, they promoted, they helped students who got, so you have to pass exam on a local level, and then you would get an opportunity to go to Korean university to study for about 2 terms, 6 months. So that's how I got my first chance to get into Korea in 2001. So what was good about this program, that's we lived in a homestay, it's called Minpakchik, which is probably not the correct way of saying it, but that's what they call it. And homestay, so I experienced, really had an opportunity to see what Korean family, just regular Korean family look like. What do they watch on TV? What do they talk about at the dinner table? What do they eat? How do they get into work? What their like regular ups and downs of everyday life. So that was good, but there was also some a little bit different, something that impressed me about Korea. First, my few things that were really different to what I was experiencing in Ukraine. For example, every time I was coming to this to regular school day, I would hop off subway, go to the gates of my university. I was studying at CUNY University. And every day I saw students demonstrating. They were demonstrating for any topic possible, starting from let's improve our relationship with North Korea, and finishing about why do we have pineapple in pizza? Like everything. Someone was doing some demonstration in front of the kids every day. Sometimes it was very powerful, big demonstration. Sometimes they were just few people. But to me, it was a demonstration of really of maturity of a civic society. So they knew that Koreans knew that if you demonstrate, if you have an opinion, you can show it, you can demonstrate it, and you probably can be heard, which was different to maybe a post-Soviet Ukraine, which is the movement was not that high, and civil society was not that developed yet. So of course I was surprised with cell phones. Cell phones, everyone had cell phone. I know it's difficult to understand for someone who was born maybe when I went to Korea. If you were born 20 years ago, you probably don't know what it means not having a cell phone. But back then, as a student, I had a cell phone, actually I did. But in Korea it was, for me, it was a privilege. In Korea, everyone already had a cell phone back then. It was a regular just button cell phone. But connection was good, and it was the major point that it was really cheap. You could buy one, you could use it for a month, you could throw it out, and you could get another one. So then another thing was back then was fastest internet. So here I have a picture of how Koreans were using internet usage starting from 2000. So even in 2000, they already had 45% of population using internet. For me, it was different because I didn't have internet where I used to live together with girls, a few girls. We were renting a flat. We didn't have internet there. We had only access to internet at our university. But in Korea, when they came, they had internet everywhere, free and very fast. This was like, for us, it was like, wow, internet. I could spend hours and hours. Nobody's gonna tell me anything, because back in Ukraine, it would be, the time would be ticking. Wow, you've got 5 minutes, 10 minutes, just finish up and do and go away. Then they already had digital cameras, and I remember we had a few students who jumped on an idea and bought this digital camera. You should understand that the digital camera 20 years ago was pretty crap for nowadays standards, but it was a thing. So the idea that you can take a picture and then you can delete it, take another one, and nothing happens to you. You don't need to go to a shop and print it out and waste all your film or waste all the paper. You just can print it out and get another, sorry, you just can click it and get another one. Another thing that, because internet was so free and everyone had computers available to them, they had what was called cyber athletes. It is still very high, very popular in Korea. But imagine you turn on TV and there is a whole TV channel which is dedicated to watching how kids or like young adults, or maybe even adults, competing for the best player, cyber player. Like to me, it was something out of from another society. I would never ever imagine that someone would be interested in playing that much, but also you got to see the whole support of the crowd. Crowd was going wild. It's like going to a soccer field. Everyone had their own sportsmen, like their own star. They call them idols, and those kids, they were really, really popular. Those who could make it to the final or semi-final, they were really popular and every young boy wanted to be the one of the best of the cyber athletes. So I mentioned here soccer, which is maybe not so much related to Korea, because when I came to Korea in 2011, one of the regular questions that you get from Koreans was, so you are from Ukraine, right? What is we don't know much about Ukraine. What's your favorite sports in Ukraine? And I would say, well, it's soccer, because Ukraine was quite popular around soccer back then. But Koreans said, oh, soccer, we never play soccer. Soccer is not what we play. We play baseball. So that was in 2011. In 2002, I left. In 2002, they hosted World Cup. And I came in Korea in 2003. And you got to see the difference. Every single person's favorite sports became soccer. Because when Koreans go for something, they go 100%, like absolutely crazy. You got to see those soccer fields. They were all covered in red t-shirts, people wearing t-shirts, and they were going crazy. They like the support for their national team was just unbelievable. All of a sudden, every young boy wanted to become a football player. And before that, they didn't even know about what the rules of soccer and why do people even play that game. So I just want to say here introducing the idea that Koreans, when something catches Koreans' mind, Koreans go for it very hard, very fast, and changes come to Korea very, very dynamically. It can be one thing today and a completely another thing the other day. Oops, what's wrong? No. Sorry. Yeah. So it happened that I still studied. So I came back to Kiev. I finished my study, and while I was studying, I started to do some work for local Koreans. And when I finished, those local Koreans introduced me to my first employer in Korea, and I moved to city Busan. Busan is on south of Korea. It's the second largest city in Korea, and it's a big port, and it's quite popular for these Russians because it's the closest port to come from Vladivostok. So lots of Russian people going there, lots of Russian sailors, Russian businesses, and unfortunately, there was lots of Russian women who were doing not very maybe let's call it socially not accepted business. it was my first career. I became we got a job as a translator, and but I was involved in different administrative jobs, and that's how I got my next job, which was in Donhay city. Donhay is on the east coast. It's a really small, really rural area. It's also a port, and I was probably one of the few foreigners there. Maybe there was maybe 10 of us. Everyone knew us. Everyone wanted to come to us and talk to us and just try us. Everyone was asking about whether my nose is real, whether my color of my eyes is real, because my nose is like quite long on the Korean standards, and people quite often assume that it's plastic surgery. Koreans try to make their noses bigger. Unlike us, who try to make our noses smaller, Koreans try to, so they always came and asked me and touched me on my nose. But it also gave me good exposure to understand what Korean government side of a point of view of what Korean government is from inside. So let me try to explain to you. Traditionally, foreigners are not allowed to go to be related to government institutions. Government institutions officials are really for Koreans only. And they're quite a different structure, something that you don't really see every day on the street. But it gave me a different perspective of what Koreans can be, like a big bureaucratic machine. And maybe government is one of the presentation of rural government. 20 years ago was a good presentation of that. So, but it helped me to work with, I was working with customs, police, immigration, court. It always gave me a different perspective of different aspect of Korean life, of Korean society. But eventually I moved to Seoul, and I moved to a big company, which it was a different move because it was international company with head office in Geneva, but Koreans had it. But in Korea they had a big branch, and all of the employees were Koreans. Well, when I came there, was the president was Aussie guy, Australian. We had one Russian and me. So although we call it international company, it was really Korean inside, with some ideas about international business, or at least how Koreans saw international business from a Korean point of view. Let's call it that way. So before I actually jump into my presentation about seeing how Korea became global, I want to go back to 1997 and Asian crisis, or Koreans call it IMF crisis. So it was a big hit on the Korean economy, something that Koreans tried to develop from a very agricultural and almost feudal society, and try to modernize, industrialize, bring technology, and they did a great job. But after the hit of Asian crisis, economic crisis, they had a lot of social disparity, and it hit very badly on Korean society. If you want to watch this movie, it's called Default. It doesn't have English name here, but it's a picture of this movie. I think it's 2001 or 2018, maybe. It's available in English, or even you can find it in Russian somewhere on the internet. It's not really maybe historic one, but it does show one point of view of how Koreans saw IMF crisis and how it hit them socially. But it leads Koreans to, first of all, it led Korean economy to restructure their financial sector because lots of banks were closed, and many had to appoint new economic rules over free economy, because it was a movement to more open neoliberal economic model. They also restructured their chaebols, something that Korean economy was built on before. They had to restructure labor market. Many unions, Koreans were a big part of Korean labor market is unions. And after this hit, many unions were not allowed to work or were given restricted responsibilities and didn't play as big role as they used to be before the crisis. And also that crisis as so IMF, it's called IMF because IMF provided loan and to bail out some of the broken companies, not broken, sorry, bankrupt companies. And one of the rules of bailing out was allowing foreigners to the local market. There were investors before, but investors couldn't go to certain industries. Investors were not allowed to go to the financial market. And not many foreigners were actually working in Korea back then. So this crisis allowed some of this cost structural, what do we call, structural movements, let's call it, to bring Korea to a new developmental model, it's called. And that's how I see it. So before in the 90s and 80s, Korea tried to reach what's called advanced economy, developed country. And in 1996, I think they were introduced to OECD countries. They became one of the 20 OECD countries, claiming the idea that now they belong to the developed world. They're not really developing country. And the strive before in the 80s and 90s was on industrialization, democratization, and modernization of the company. But when the crisis hit, and when you were at the beginning of the 21st century, Koreans had to become with a new developmental model, and that was developing global Korea, a country that cannot only belong to the developed country, but can also compete on the global market and can have global advancement compared to other countries. And I think this is a very important model because once Koreans reach this idea, this level of a developed country, they could easily get into what's called middle income trap. I'm not sure how many economists here, but the idea of middle income trap is that when a new developing country develops very fast and brings new technology, new businesses, new finances of the country, they first capital comes to the country because labor is really cheap. But then salaries started growing up, and then Korea, this particular country, loses its competitive advantages compared to other countries. So let's say that's what's happening now in China. Businesses before business tried to open their branches or go to China because labor was cheap. Now labor in China becoming more expensive, and businesses are moving to other countries like, let's say, Bangladesh, maybe still India, so other countries. So Korea now had to overcome this middle income trap, which was not, I don't think it was even an accepted idea of middle income trap, but Koreans somehow sensed it, and they needed to come up with a new idea for their model. You should say that when Koreans say that we become a new model, developmental model, for some reason in Korea, it becomes their national idea. So before they said, okay, we're developing our country, and every single person was participating and had the sense of their life is to bring this country to a level where my children, my grandchildren can enjoy, can be rich, not can be rich, but can live a decent life. They don't need to struggle for hunger. They don't need to think about not being able to go to study, not being able to have medical care when they need it. And every single person was working on this idea. If you talk to Koreans of maybe from a generation from 60s and 70s, they will tell you that they were working hard to get there. So even when I came to Korea in 2011, Koreans still had a 6 days working week. So my week started on Monday, but we finished on Saturday midday. And this came from 60s and 70s when Koreans were working hard to bring the economy to a certain level. So that was a mentality, a national model for those generations. Now, the new generation needed a new model, and they wanted to, and it became again their national identity. Or at least that's how I saw it as a foreigner living there. For me, it was all developing very fast in front of my eyes. And compared to other countries, I saw that Koreans accepted this very fast and took it really serious and really deep to their heart. Every single Korean. Maybe even, I'm not maybe politically correct when I say every single Korean, probably not, but it felt like for me. Oops. So after this crisis hit, Korea was hit with the idea of damaged brand, and because investors started to feel that Korean economy is not developed well, it's too risky to invest money to do business with Koreans, and they somehow had to work on their brand. So these are pictures from 2009, but I think even before that, 2003, 2005, they were talking about how people of the world need to see us differently. We need to bring back trust. We need to bring back the idea that so I think I've read somewhere that there is a brand in ranking. So what countries have what position? And Koreans, I think, was hitting maybe 30th place. And they said, no, we're gonna change this brand and we're gonna bring trust of developers, of investors and foreigners. And we will bring this Korean brand to a level of 12th, I think the goal was. But so how did exactly they did it? So Chaebols, of course, main businesses, they were working on the restoring their brand. So Samsung, you see here, there is a development of how they developed their LCD screens from late 90s to the 2000s. Then LG was working on their brand. I think they damaged their brand quite a bit back then, but other Korean Chaebols started going into more technological business, and we're bringing new brand to the foreign markets. When I say foreign markets, I don't mean like economy-wise, but also to what we as regular people think about Korea. You know, we have different perceptions when we think about different countries. For example, USA, you might have some idea of what USA is. You know, France, Japan, and Korea back then. I wouldn't say it was very popular or famous brand. So Koreans had to work on making Korea more recognizable, more acceptable. And so Chaebols had worked on their own business because it was part of their business, but I also liked how governments stood up, and they created a model too, and they actually had a plan. So these are a few posters from different times of global Korea. They created this global Korea as a national brand. And if you lived there in Korea back then, whenever you go, everything was global Korea. Everything was global. So every single step, every single shop had a banner on it, global Korea or global something. So global Korea was everywhere in every business name. For example, starting from a tour guide, tour business. Even if you Google now, see one of the popular Korean search engines, Naver or down.net, naver.com, I think, or down.net, if you type global career, at the beginning, they normally give you a search for the businesses. And if I just typed another day, global career, and search hit something from tourist company, beauty company, some entertainment companies, which is obvious nowadays. But there also was a company selling bidet toilets, or companies selling caps and just regular pants. So global career became a national idea, and everyone wanted to call themselves global career or global something. This is about the National Presidential Council on National Branding. So they had this plan with 10 goals: promoting Taekwondo, creating service, international volunteer service, adaptation of Korean Wave. So Korean Wave started before that. Korean Wave, I think, officially maybe started in 1997, maybe 8, and was started becoming big in Japan and in East Asia, maybe 2003-5. But in 2009, Making Korean Wave was a part of the national brand campaign. If you don't know, Korean Wave, it relates to K-pop, K-drama, K-movies, Korean movies, and so on. So they also introduced Global Korean Scholarship. I don't know what the 5th part means, Campus of Asia program. I don't know, maybe some people, if you know that, maybe you can enlighten me. So they increased the external aid to help other countries, developed countries. And I think Ukraine was also a part of the recipient of this program. So they also put their efforts on developing technology, nurturing culture and tourism, and treating foreigners and multicultural families better. That was a part of the actual plan, and helping Koreans to become global citizens. So today, as a foreigner living in Korea, I want to stop on these 9 and 10 points and maybe try to explain you how I experience Koreans working on those on that point, on those plans. At the same time, you should understand that demographic started to change. So Koreans before, I think I felt somewhere before that Koreans were, during the 90s and 80s, Koreans were not allowed to travel overseas, but at the late 90s, beginning of the 90s, 80s, late 80s, beginning of the 90s, they were all officially opened, and many went for immigration, many went to work for, many went to study, many went to work for international companies and coming back. So, and tourism was, Koreans finally obtained some amount of money so they could allow themselves to travel abroad and bring those different ideas about the different world back to Korea. So there was also returning immigrants. I remember in 2005-07, if you open up a channel, and there was a few popular Korean programs, broadcasting programs, and one of them, guests of those programs, were celebrities, like they may be singers, they may be actors, but those were Koreans who went to the States. Usually it was the States, maybe Europe somewhere, as kids, maybe teenagers with their parents. Then they stayed in Korea in the West for about maybe 10-15 years. They still knew some Korean language, but they also were fluent in English. And they were different type of Koreans. They even knew those Koreans that live different life in different country. And then they were coming back. And those shows with those people were very, very popular. Because they kind of understood both worlds. They understood Koreans, but they also understood the Westerners. And this was a new kind of demographic, something that Koreans didn't have before. Another part of demographics was foreign wives. Korea is one of those countries when male population when the female population is a minority, because unfortunately at some stage having a girl having a daughter was not popular thing. And so at some stage, Koreans decided to maybe to have abortion if they found out that they're having a daughter instead of a son. I think this trend is illegal now, and when you get to ultrasound scan, you cannot, doctor cannot tell you the gender of your future child officially. There are some ways to find out and ask the doctor to do it, because I think maybe nowadays having a daughter is not such a big deal. Having a daughter is actually quite popular. When I was in Korea, maybe 2008, 2009, one of my friends was saying, oh, we don't want to have a son, we want to have a daughter. But this trend coming back changed the demographics in a way that male population was much higher, especially in rural areas. So Koreans started exporting, importing of foreign wives. Girls were coming from Philippines, Bangladesh, Thailand, Vietnam, quite a few Russian wives too. So there were actual websites where you could go and you would apply, I want to have a foreign wife, and you will be followed the wife. And unfortunately, if girls were coming from very poor countries, they didn't know where they were coming to, because on average, if you're living in a big city, you don't have struggles to find a wife for yourself. But if you're a little bit poor and you live somewhere in a rural area, you might struggle, and then you will be you might consider bringing yourself a foreign wife. And those wives, unfortunately, they didn't know where they were going to. They didn't know Korean language. They didn't know Korean culture. They didn't understand the conditions they're gonna live. And unfortunately, it created some problems, like domestic violence, like some of the wives of those not being accepted, not been assimilated in Korea. But these issues already in 2005, 2007, those issues were already discussed. Everyone was talking about, newspapers were writing about it. You could hear about it on TV. So Koreans started to work on this problem, and they did a few things which I'm going to talk about later, which actually improved situation a lot. I'm not someone who know this issue very close. I don't have anyone to relate personal stories to. That's only what I've heard from the news or from reading newspapers and talking to other people. So maybe if you have a better picture, better understanding of the situation, maybe we can talk about it after the presentation. On the other hand, we also seen foreigners coming to Korea, because now salaries in Korea was quite good for foreigners, and we have an influx of English teachers or English lecturers coming to Korea, because Koreans started to understand that English language is one of the important languages, and they wanted to learn English from native speakers. So they created a special visa for English teachers and English lecturers. So they also had an influx of now poor countries coming to Korea and work for those jobs that Koreans maybe didn't want to, like in construction and culture. We could see about quite a few Filipinos coming, many Chinese coming to Korea to work. And also there was entertainment industry was also popular, where there was special agencies who hired foreigners to work for, to sing, dance, to play in the movies, and so on. They also started to have some foreign advisors were coming in, and also US and UN troops. They were less now, because some of the US by the extent they decreased their troops in Korea, but they still were in Korea, and they somehow influenced life of foreigners, or maybe it's better to say what Koreans thought about foreigners and whom they how they could relate to foreigners, because before that, it was the majority of foreigners on Korean streets were US troops. And normally if you would see a male person on the street, Koreans automatically assume that he must be from an US army or from UN troops. So now they were still present, but nowadays but the extent Koreans started to understand that there are other foreigners who can be in Korea. So this is I want you to understand what those population meant, because you should understand that Korea is one of the mono-ethnic countries in the world. So I took this picture from from Wikipedia. Korea now South Korea now has only 96% of population as Koreans, but before, I think maybe 10 years ago, it was much higher at the list, and foreigners were really minority. I think Koreans, historically, they were really proud to be a mono-ethnic country. And it was, I've read this book, it's called, I'll tell you later on. It's someone talking about how Korea is different from Japan or China. And in this book, they said that back in the day when Korea was maybe, before 19th century, when Korea was just part of, let's call it ancient Korea. And they were always, Chinese going to invade Japan, they were going through Korea, and Japanese were hitting back and going to invade China, and they were going through in Korean peninsula. So Koreans were always experiencing wars, and foreigners, Chinese, going through their land. So, and they wanted to try to keep themselves to one group, and it was really important to say that you're pure Korean. So it was hard to the point when foreign troops go through your land, many women unfortunately get raped, and so you could get pregnant from a foreigner against your will even. So I don't know how that historically affect, but that was in that book, saying that if Koreans found out that that someone in their village became pregnant from a foreigner, they would force this woman to do abortion or to kill this woman, so she wouldn't bring foreign blood into Korean society. And it was part of the Korean identity, I guess, to be pure Korean, to be real Korean, to have pure blood. There is this thing called pure blood. Unfortunately, there is for multicultural families, there is still an idea of that you are not good enough because you might have blood from two different races. So those are called half blood. I think maybe it's changing now, but it was still part of the Korean idea in 10 years ago. Here I can see who those immigrants actually were. So you can see that 50% of them are actually Chinese, some Americans, some people from Southeast Asia. I assume many of those were actually those foreign wives or those low-paid workers. There are some people coming from post-Soviet countries. Uzbekistan is one of of the highest nationalities. Partially because there is a big diaspora in Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Korean diaspora, and they were coming back to Korea because they were given special status, so they could go back, but they would come as Uzbekistani citizen or Kazakhstani citizen, some other countries. So even when you could go on the street, and even when you wouldn't see those maybe foreigners that much, because Chinese maybe look similar. Maybe some of the Southeast Asians also look somewhat similar. They look different, but they look somewhat similar to Koreans. So as a white person living in Korea, it was quite often attracted lots of attention. And Koreans tried to come to me and talk to me. And I could understand that for many, I was maybe the first or the only foreigner they ever seen before, especially when I was living in rural part. So going back to this idea of new national model, new development model of Korea. So Koreans now understood that they now will have to compete differently on the international market, and so in order not to get into this middle income trap, you had to bring something new. You had to bring develop those businesses that do not purely depend on low wage. Those are businesses that are highly intellectual or highly creative. Those that require lots of professionalism and precision. So they started. And those maybe they didn't see them as a priority. Those industries as a priority at the beginning, but that's how they, after competition inside on local market, that's how those businesses became prominent, and that's how they could survive on international arena. So internet and telecommunications, of course, we know Korea is a leader in telecommunications, internet, digital progress. Also K-wave, Korean wave, it includes Korean drama, Korean movies, K-pop. There's also those industries related to creativity, to thinking differently, to present yourself differently. Then Korean beauty was maybe a business that was not taken, that didn't have maybe high competition on the international market. To be honest, I still don't know why Koreans got that high on the K-beauty market. Because when I came, to be honest, Koreans didn't think about their Korean beauty products as an elite product. They always tried to use Japanese products. Japanese products were always something that Korean women thought, oh, the best for my skin, and they tried to always buy it. But nevertheless, just in 10 years, Korean beauty became a thing, and every of my friends whom from Ukraine, from Russia, they always wanted me to bring some Korean cosmetics back from Korea, because all of a sudden it became a very big thing. Then medical career is also maybe not that popular when we think about Korean, but Korean health tourism is quite a big thing, because I think they hit a really good niche between being quite developed with good pharmaceuticals and good equipment, but not as expensive as maybe the States, Canada, or other European countries are. So they also tried to develop Korean cuisine. So there was when I was there, Korean government tried to promote Korean cuisine and tied it to Korean brand, because we all know about Thai cuisine, we all know about French cuisine, Italian cuisine. So Korea said, "Oh, we have a good cuisine too. We can bring it to the level level of world recognition." And when people would be thinking about Korea, they would be thinking also about our food. Korean language all of a sudden became really, really popular. As I told you, when I was a student, Korean language was not a thing. We struggled to find teachers, we struggled to find books and programs. So Korean government was helping us, but it was not that highly available. And people were randomly looking at me, why are you studying Korean? What random language you choose for yourself? But all of a sudden, Korean language became really popular and one of the most desirable languages to know. And of course, Korean government supported it. They had a few organizations that I know of which supported bringing up Korean brand to global market. So there are some of them here. So, and with this idea of global career, global development, this came an idea of global mindset. What does it mean to be a citizen of who wants to compete on a global level? And there are, I think, the core ideas about someone who possesses a global mind is someone who has open thinking, maybe strategic thinking. They pursued diversity. They understand the world outside world, not the only world inside them, but also outside world. They want to, they're easily adaptable, and they also have a caring behavior. But at the same time, traditionally, historically, Koreans had obstacles which were maybe contradictory with those goals. For example, Korean society is really hierarchical. So there is top to down. From every relationship is somehow related to someone, depending on your position in society. In Korean, when the first thing I learned as a Korean language student is that you cannot be friends with anyone who is not your age. Your only friends are people of your own age, those who were born on the same year of you. Those who 2 years younger or 2 years older are not your friends. They're either your big brothers, big sisters, or younger brothers and sisters. So this is really hierarchical, and you have a position in this world, which is not how you should be thinking about someone who has a global mindset, right? The Korean society is also very conformative. You have to, they have such expression, wanta, is someone who doesn't belong to Korean society, someone who is really different, maybe. And this is not a good opportunity for creativity, for challenging ideas. They also judge someone who is different. So if you think differently, you have to see. There is in Korean, there is always expression. You have to nunchi poda. Nunchi is eye and poda look. So you always have to think what others think about you. This is part of your normal everyday life, and this is really important for Koreans. This is how society works. Again, if you always have to think what others think about you, how can you think about outside of the box? How can you challenge what's now? How can you be? You're probably adaptable, but you're not adaptable in a good way. You're adaptable because you always have a mask on yourself, on your face, because maybe because you have to be as others or similar to others. You don't need to be. You can't be different because it's judged by society. So your relationships are also based on your position in the society. You get, for example, you get your job quite often because of what university you came from. And if someone who's hiring from the same university, you can be quite likely to be hired compared to someone who's coming from different university. So I as a manager, for example, I always try to hire someone from the same university that I came from, or I hire someone from the same city, from the same town who's from. So they don't hire on merits. They hire on how you're related to me. So, and another part of the maybe Korean society also it's about hierarchical society and conformity, that you never challenge authority. So if you're a teacher, Koreans would never doubt your knowledge. Your teacher is always right. David, asking questions to a Korean teacher can be taken offensive by a Korean teacher. My husband was a teacher teaching English in Korean university, and he was surprised how questions were not existent. He had to drag students to ask him questions because it's rude to ask questions because it can be seen as if you don't trust your teacher, don't trust that your teacher knows everything already. You kind of challenge him, his knowledge. And you never ask questions to doctors, to policemen, because they're already there, the government officials, because they're there, and you have to accept it, because otherwise it can be seen irrespectable, that you're not respecting them. And it's again maybe coming back from this idea of being original. You have to be original for some idea. Original is I've never thought about it as a foreigner, but for Koreans it's really a core idea that everything should be original. So, I'm original Korean. I'm this gold, or this piece of art is original. So for example, you kind of think that maybe this art should be different. Art should be shouldn't be original, because if everyone tries to be original, everyone comes up to the same point where they started. Because if you're not original, you kind of disperse from the point of where everyone else. But in Korea, it's important to be original and claims that whatever you do is original. I don't know, maybe it's not clear to understand. I don't know how to explain it. Maybe Marilyn, if you know how to explain, maybe if you're familiar with this idea.
It has to be yennare. It's like in the old days. Like it should be like conforming to the old model, whether it be painting or, I mean, we have it in other cultures too, like homemade, like grandma used to make, but like, for example, the food from North Korea. It's like, I'm forgetting the name. Yeonju, can you help me? Bibimbap, what is it? From North Korea? Like there's all these restaurants that say, what is it?
평양냉면.
Yeah.
원조 평양냉면. 원조.
So it's difficult if you strive always to be original, coming from the background. It's different for you to become to create something new. Maybe that's at least how I saw it. And working in a Korean company and being related to in the HR department, I saw how Koreans try to break those ideas and beliefs, and what they try to do. They try to do different strategies. So they claim that they now have new hiring and promotion practices. So, for example, you would hire someone who's open-minded. You would hire someone who's different. You would hire someone who thinks things differently. But to be honest, I saw that still same people were hired, those who conform to the idea of what's accepted by the country. So different people were not that much desired. And same on the promotion. In a Korean company, you're not promoted from on a Western country, you come to a country or to a company, you become from a very low. But if you show your passion, if you show your desire, if you show that you can understand business, you can promote business, you can jump from very low to very high. You can become a manager just in a few months, maybe, or in a few years, and become someone very influential in company. In Korean company, instead, you come and you start as regular employee, then you go to TERI, then you go to. So I got in 5 years of my Korean career, I became from regular employee to Maria TERI. Then you go to different ranks, and you get promoted not based on your merit, but you get promoted on how many years you served in this company. So this is basically what army promotion. You become general only if you served in this company long enough, or if you're the oldest person in the company. This brings another idea of Koreans been liking to be loyal. So 10 years ago, even before that, you come to a Korean company and you start from very bottom, and you believe that this will be one of the only company that you will work for. this was started changing. Even I saw in maybe 2007, 2008, 2003, some of my friends tried to leave their company and move to another company, which was rare, but many tried to leave company and start their own business. So it's normal for Koreans to always serve one company, or maybe it's maximum of two. While in the West, for example, in New Zealand, in Australia, if you stay in the same company for 2 years, you've seen that you're not moving, you're not developing, you're not promoting, and you're stagnating. While in Koreans, the most important thing is how you're loyal to the company. And if you leave, you not leave because you leave the company. You only leave because you want to develop your own business. You would say to your boss, I'm leaving not because I'm betraying you. I'm only leaving because I found this new idea that I want to work on, and I'm just trying to. So you kind of have to apologize for leaving the country, for leaving the company, kind of thing, which was, as a foreigner, was kind of different idea for me. Another part of this loyalty is that once you leave company, if you for some reason you decided to go to better, let's say, salary, and then you say, oh, you change the company, you say, oh, yes, salary may be better, but the culture is not the same. I want to come back. And I always ask my hiring manager, so what if, let's hire someone who already left, let's take them back. For this, they always reply, those who leave never come back, never can come back. They're not given another chance because they betrayed us, they left us, they're not loyal, we cannot trust them anymore. They should not be part of our company ever, which is different to New Zealand company. I left Korean company, then a couple years later, I was easy to return there. New Zealanders saw it, yeah, sure, you've left there, you saw the different picture, now you're a better employee for us, now you have a different point of view, now you understand that we are a better company, that now you will be more loyal to us, kind of thing. But Koreans, once you betrayed, you're left, you're cut off of this here. So they tried to hire foreigners because they wanted to see a different perspective. And one of the ideas of hiring me was also trying to show Koreans that there are different ways of looking at these things. They also brought they tried to bring a new understanding of productivity. So in Korea, if you start your business day, maybe at 8:30, 9 o'clock, and then your official working day, which is written in your contract, should be finished at 6 p.m. But you will be staying for 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 hours, no, maybe not 10 hours, but at least extra 2, 3, 4 hours, waiting for your boss to leave the office first. And this is seen as a diligent work. Those who work diligently gets better praise, gets promoted. They are someone who they consider to be good workers. While in effect, if you work longer days, it shows that you have smaller productivity, because productivity is how much you can do divided by the number of hours of how long it took you to do. So if you do the same job, someone working in the Western company can do this job for 5 hours and just leave their work and go do their own business. Their productivity is higher. While in Koreans, it took them to do the same number of work, for 8-10 hours. So companies now try to bring new idea of productivity. You're not productive when you work diligently. You're productive when you work smart. So we try to bring an idea of working smart and fast, and not staying in after hours trying to portray that you're a diligent worker. So another idea was allowing more responsibilities to the staff. So traditionally, Koreans seeing that if I'm a boss, I know everything and I can tell you what to do, and you will be doing only those things that I'm telling you to do. That's again going back to challenging authority. If my boss tells me that, he knows better, I'd better do this. There's was quite famous story about how I think a Korean airline aircraft crashed when co-pilot knew there's something wrong with the aircraft, but he couldn't bring it up to the pilot because he could not challenge the authority. Similar was going on in a Korean company, when employees might have seen something's wrong, but they wouldn't tell that because, oh, my boss knows better. I just trust him. We just follow him, and we try to. And this was coming from not giving more responsibilities. So now companies try to go. So this is your block of your responsibilities. This is what you want to do or you need to do. Please deal with it and bring the result, which is was absolutely new idea, new paradigm for Korean workers. New understanding of team building. You know, quite often Koreans, if you go to team building for Koreans, maybe going together with your employees for to drink and go maybe and get really, really drunk and get close to each other while drinking. While this is not a real team building, maybe this getting closer to each other, but team building is something that allows a team work together. So we try to do to team build during sports activities. So we would divide Koreans into different groups and challenge them to through different maybe races, if you call them, different sports activities. So playing, so we would, whole company would be divided randomly into different. So some people would, it would be a mixture of managers, of employees, different ages, different genders, because in another part of the gender inequality, our company was an international company, but let's be honest, we had only one female manager, and let's say two female managers. Both of them were not married, and general idea of them were, or they only work here, or they're only managers because they couldn't realize themselves as wives. So they're only managers because they're not wives, because they don't have husbands. They were unlikely to find a husband, and that's why they became managers. They have nothing to do. And so they were not seen as the women who are actually capable of bringing the business to a new level. So we were mixing different genders as well, and giving them opportunity to find out solution how to bring their team to the, be faster, be smarter, and so on. So we tried to different team building activities. And of course, the company promotes foreign language studying English. So if you would go, company would pay you to go study English, and you should have passed your exam. And if you pass your exam, you can keep the money. If you don't pass exam, you would have to pay those money back to the company. Oops, again. So at the same time, I want to say that's how Koreans try to change themselves as a society, but I also try to say point of view how life of me, the foreigner, starting to be changing. First, I want to say, mixed up the slides. So when you come to Korea, you have this certificate of alien registration as a foreigner. This is the old one. This is what I used to have. This is from, I think, what's this? Maybe 2006. I think now they look differently, but the same idea is that you're always given a number. So the first number is your date of birth, before the dash. After dash, you have 1, 2 for Koreans, 1 is for men, 2 for a female. And then as a foreigner, you have 5 or 6. 5 is a female and 6 is a male. Whatever you need to do in Korea, it's to register yourself on any website, you always need to have this ID number. It always, if you want to go buy tickets for a movie, you need to register on the website, and if you want to be registered on the website, you need to have this number. And even if you have this number, so I had this number. Not every foreigner could have this number, but I had it because I was officially employed. If you want to register on this website, the website would not take your registration because your number would be 5 or 6. It wouldn't be 1 or 2 as a Koreans. And the system automatically would dismiss you saying, oh, your number isn't correct. So that was a very big problem for us as foreigners at the beginning. I should say maybe until 2005, 2007. But this was brought up, maybe I don't know how, but many websites started to allow foreigners to be registered on the websites, and it became easy for us to go to do shopping, like G-Market or like some other big e-commerce markets on Korea, going shopping. It just made our life easier anywhere. Then banking for a foreigner. First, when we came, we couldn't have debit cards or credit cards. As a foreigner, it was not allowed. But in the mid-2000s, it's also changed. You could be given, if you have a proof of your work, if you have a proof of where you got your money from, you could have a credit card or debit card. And you should understand that credit card or debit card is really really good thing to have in Korea, because you can pay anything. Even you don't need to have a separate, for example, transportation card. You just can pay with your debit card straight on. You just tick it on the bus in subway, and your money will be automatically taken out from your account. Or you would have bonus system. So having them, and it was widely acceptable, and it was a really good move, because before that we had to use cash, and that was not. It was just only supporting black market. Also, if you use your card, you could claim it when you get tax refund. And so anything, 2 million, I think back then, I don't know how much now, but just 2 million wons could be claimed against your tax refund. And if you don't have a proof for that, in terms of your bank statement, if you always pay with the cash, this would be, you will be kind of, it will be challenging for you to do the tax refund. So, and also, you're not allowed to have phones as a registered numbers at the beginning. You're only you're allowed to have prepaid phones. And it also became a very big deal in mid-2000s, because nowadays your identity could be tied to your phone number. So you first receive your phone number, and then with this phone number you can open a bank account. You can do your e-government, which I'm going to talk to you later about e-government's procedures, everything. So you first need to have your ID number, then phone number. And if you have a prepayment phone number, it was difficult to tie this number to your name. But unfortunately, it changed. And I remember in 2005, I was changing telephone companies. And before that, you had to leave your phone number. So for example, let's say I was moving from, I think, Samsung to SK. And if you was moving from Samsung Communications, you should leave the phone number that you were leaving with them. You had to release it and go to SK and get a new number. But it has changed in the mid-2000s, and I could bring my number with me because it was tied to my identity, which is a good thing, because all the services were connected to this number. All my friends, all my connections knew this number, and changing a new number, use of phone number, became quite a challenge. Would have been a challenge. So, but luckily it changed. It changed. So I'm trying to say that it hasn't changed early on for Koreans, but as a foreigners, those changes came later to us. But Korean government realized that we are now becoming a part of the Korean society, and they try to make those changes easier for us. So another part, which is e-government service, was only allowed for Koreans for a very long time. E-government is basically when you do all your papers that you basically would ever need from Korean government institutions. You would do all of them online. And it started to roll out in 2005, 2007 for Koreans, but again, foreigners for a long time were not allowed to use them. Mainly, much biggest problem was that because many foreigners didn't know Korean language, and all the services were purely in Korean, and all the papers and all the requests for those papers could only have been done in Korean language. But later on they changed it, and the English became on the same level as Korean.
Maria, I think we have some questions. How many more slides do you have? I think some people want to hear a little bit more about your personal experiences. How many more slides do you have?
Okay, so I'll go with maybe 5 more slides, but all those maybe stories are my personal stories. So maybe if
the questions were more about your personal. Let me show you in the chat. Well, go ahead.
Yes, sure. So I just want to say that also government started to support us foreigners. They opened lots of support offices, support services. So there was a special helpline in Seoul where you could call and ask translation for anything from taxi to a lawyer to a hospital. You just need to dial a number and someone will pick up and do translation for you. Then there was a service called Hi Korea, which supported foreigners on all levels, from registration to providing information about law and stuff. Then Seoul Global Center was a big thing because they did provide counseling and job, and they helped with job search and providing education, not only Korean language, but also some for those foreigners who didn't have any occupation, like Korean wives, like foreign wives. They provided them other education, trying to help them to assimilate into the society. And all other services, major government services, started to be available in English. Even, claiming your taxes. When I came, claiming your taxes was not available in English, and only your employer could claim them for you. But you always wanted to use your taxes yourself. So when I was leaving, it was already fully available in English. And another part which I want to say, that Korean government also jumped into hiring foreigners as officials, which traditionally was not allowed at all. You should understand that officials in Korea is really, really important and respectful job. If you're official, you can, many doors will be open for you in the future if you ever decide to leave official government job. You will also bring respect to your family, and family always will be being proud of someone working as official. So, and becoming a foreign official was challenging because some jobs are related to maybe state secrets and some strategic areas. But even back government made this open, and Koreans, many foreigners were allowed to be hired for very high rank, official positions as government officials. And another part of that how foreigners became a part of the pop culture. So when I came, Korean dramas were only about Koreans living their Korean life, but already in mid 2000s, you could see that foreigners became part of the Korean drama, and I saw it. If foreigners are becoming part of the Korean drama, it means they are becoming part of Korean society. So there were movies showing, again, maybe foreign teachers showing about how Koreans try to communicate with Koreans, showing how Koreans, normally foreigners were seen as those who, like most popular maybe role for a foreigner was how foreign businessmen trying to falls in love with a Korean girl, and Korean man tries to prove that he's just a foreigner, that he can't get the woman I love. But the idea that foreigners were part of those movies was quite significant for me. They were now accepted as Korean society now accepted that foreigners do exist and they do part of our life. So also foreigners on TV, and this is a picture of a show called Minyo Suda, and I thought I added my picture of myself, how I became part of this show, and the show was how based on it's a talk show, and it was quite popular. It was gaining quite a big popularity quite rapidly. The idea was they invited a few girls, maybe as you can see on the picture, maybe there are like 12 of us, 15 of us, and we would talk about Korea and Koreans in Korean language, which was not something obvious back then. Foreigners who spoke Korean language were quite a big surprise for Korean. If you come to a Korean on the street and you greet them in Korean language, they would be, wow, you speak Korean language, no way. And they would try to go back to speaking in English with you. And if you keep going in Korean, in a very good level of Korean, they would be, wow, this is unbelievable. And they would be asking you how you learned and everything. So those shows of foreigners speaking Korean, they become very popular. But mainly we were discussing Koreans from our point of view, and that some good stuff, some bad stuff. And Koreans, even some quite often Koreans would be criticized. But I like how Koreans took this criticism quite with open mind. Like, you know, you never want to be criticized, especially for a foreigner coming to your country, earning your money, getting your jobs, let's call it, and then coming and blaming and criticizing for you. But I was surprised how the what do you call it? How the Koreans say, yes, we should learn about it. Yes, the points that they bring up are quite important, and we need to listen to them, and let's talk about and discuss it. And then I don't know if they're still popular, but back then they were popular, like Neva Cafe and Down Cafe, those little pages, personal pages of blogs, yeah. It was quite interesting to read those blogs of how Koreans say, yes, this is a point, I haven't heard about before about our society. And now those foreigners, they bring it up, and let's think about it and let's work on it. So there was also foreigners on the radio, and broadcasting in English was popular in many. So before they had this Ariran TV, and Ariran TV was only job was to promote Korea and Koreans to the outside society. Nowadays, Ariran was talking about foreigners in Korea, but also how foreigners become different, how Korea becomes different, and was explaining Korean point of view in English. And also, I think maybe I just did a research that K-pop singers are maybe not that popular yet, because I think they still face lots of criticism because K-pop should be only Korean pop and you cannot bring any foreigners. But I do hear, I did see a few foreigners trying to be part of the Korean pop groups, and they get some maybe prominence. Maybe they didn't stay last, but Koreans becoming open up to idea that maybe our pop is not only for us, but also foreigners can be accepted. And so this is all of me. Sorry, it was very long. I didn't even look at the time. Sorry, I can see you all tired. So let's go back briefly to the questions. I'm so sorry you should have interrupted me earlier.
No, thank you. This is a very, very, very extensive overview of, you know, those particular 10 years. And it's very interesting. You had many, many, many insights and many, many anecdotes to share. I'm looking at the first question was, I think it was Mira. She said, it was very interesting. Oh, somebody got my chat. It was basically, something happened to my chat. Yeah. The question was, have you ever met any Soviet Koreans in South Korea? If so, how do you see them integrating into the mainstream contemporary culture of Korea?
Right. So I think Soviet Koreans can be also broken up into the two big categories by age, maybe. So there are in Korea they're called Koreans, and related to the people from Koryo age. So those people who left Korea when it was still Koryo, and we moved to Japan, or maybe we moved to Russia back then, and then from Russia they will dispersed in on territory of post-Soviet Union. And those were maybe people who grew up in Soviet area, Soviet times, and they came back to Korea because of their Korean heritage, Korean background. And those post-Soviet Koreans who were born already after Soviet Union collapsed. And those two groups are completely two different groups. So how do you see them integrating into the mainstream culture? So to be honest, I think those who were born in Soviet Union and came back to Korea, they couldn't could not integrate into Korean society quite well. They were different people with different perspectives. They did integrate maybe well, better compared to complete foreigner, someone who didn't understand basic Korean culture. Then on average, those people spoke Korean better because they could remember. Some of the Koreans told me that back, for example, in Sakhalin, it was popular for parents to go to work to a city, and they would leave their kids with their grandparents. And grandparents living in villages, in rural areas, they didn't speak Russian back then, and their primary language was Korean. So many Koreans were growing up with their Korean grandparents speaking only Korean, and they could study Russian when they would go back and join their family in the city when they go to school. So many of those Koreans did speak good Korean language, but they were different because Korea was different too. Korea was, as I say, it's a very dynamic change, a very fast, dynamically changing country, and those people were, I think, behind. They couldn't catch up with how fast it was changing. They did well. They understood Koreans, but they didn't understand new generation Koreans. And new generation Koreans are quite different. They grew up with internet. They grew up with. It's quite a big difference in between Koreans themselves as a generations. Very big gap between those who grew up with internet and those who didn't have internet, and maybe even wealth, because I remember in 2000 it was discussed how people in their 20s, now they're in their 30s, they didn't know what the actual hunger is and what it meant to work hard as their parents did. So you also could see that those Soviet Koreans who were younger, they could come easily and they could catch up with new generation, while those who were older, they tried to catch up with older society, but older society was not that accepting of them. Does that answer the question, or would you like to ask me more?
Thank you very much, Maria. Yes, this is what I actually suspected, that they have troubles in integrating in, and I read some scholars who were claiming that the Koreans in South Korea, they have this attitude like towards Soviet Koreans as imperfect Koreans. And
improper Koreans, did you say?
Imperfect Korean, yes, yeah. And
like not those real Koreans.
Yeah, and thank you very much. I just wanted to know your own
but you
vision.
Also should understand that all the Koreans, they didn't live in this idea of global Korea. So the accepting of any foreigners was difficult for them. I don't think it's true for younger generation.
Yeah, but they were not foreigners in general.
In a sense,
they were co-ethnics, returning co-ethnics, but.
But let's face it, they grew up in a different country.
Yes, they mentally, of course,
different.
Culturally, they diverged a lot. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So there was another question about when you were on Misuda. I don't know, I think Heejin left already, but the question had come in to talk about your experience working with the Koreans on the Korean television station when you were on Misuda, when you were on that talk show for foreign women. Were there any, that was the question. I think Heejin asked that question. I'm not sure if she's still here. But anyway, is there anything else you'd like to share about how you dealt with the managers and the crew?
Maybe it's actually quite a broad question, and maybe we could discuss it for another hour. But basically, how those shows brought up in about 2 weeks or a week before the show, before the actual filming, we were given a general topic, and the topic was left in a chat, and girls who wanted to participate would answer those questions and see their perspective. For example, to be honest, I don't even remember what those topics were, so I had to research them and see what I was, what part of shows I used to be. And I remember one part of was discussing about volunteering and how Koreans can be devoted to something, to a particular cause that they believe. And and then they give you, okay, so Koreans, as a Korean, we are very, we like volunteering, we like to help our society. What do you think about it? And everyone would throw in their ideas. Some were positive, some were negative, some were neutral. Then a script writer would write a script, and we would come on a day of filming, and we were given the script. So sometimes, I should say that general main ideas were still left. So if you would comment, for example, I would comment that I remember about this show of volunteering was a big oil spillage in the east part of Korea, and all the Koreans, just one nation just got up and they went to this small city and they cleaned up, and they worked hard day and night to clean up this oil spillage from the sea. And it just amazed me how one nation can get up and do it all as one. So I left this comment, and this would and the script writer would leave this comment for me to say, or sometimes my comments, if I would comment too much, my comments would be divided between different girls and given to other girls. Sometimes I didn't see it as fair, because simply because Korean language level was not the same, and some of them couldn't deliver the idea on the level that I wanted to deliver it, for example. But anyhow, they wanted to give everyone a chance to speak up and be on TV, on camera. And so you would come in the beginning. I think we would come in maybe, I don't know, 8 o'clock. A few hours would be killed on doing makeup and we were given makeup, hairstyling. Also, we were given even clothes. So all those clothes that we filmed is not our clothes. It was delivered by special companies who were working on fashion, and they would be paid for it, but they also were promoted. They were given advertisement. So then a few hours killed on that. Then we would go through the script with the primary what do you call them, MC, and we would try to say those ideas. Some girls would be reading it and wouldn't understand what it's all about and what they should comment about. But it was maybe we would be doing this for about 2 hours, and then the actual filming. And actual filming was always different. So there is a general idea of what you should be saying, but you wouldn't follow the script completely. Quite often, just natural jokes would pop up, natural, just other comments would come up into someone's mind because someone would say something. And then, so you would say something, then it goes to Koreans, and Koreans would reply back to you, and they would ask you other questions. Those Koreans were guests, they were not prepared, they didn't know anything about the script, but they obviously would have some comments regarding your comments. So, and this was naturally filmed. So it was kind of scripted, but it would also have a big part of the natural, actual movement. And so the question was, how did the Koreans, how was my experience working with those Koreans? So actually, script writers were quite young girls, maybe in their 20s and their 30s. Not so, maybe 20s. So they were quite open to different ideas, to criticism, bringing up criticism on the main channel, TV channel. But then MC Nam Hyesok, actually he's quite popular and he's quite open-minded himself. But sometimes he would say, no, we shouldn't talk about it. Or we should talk about this from different perspective, from different angle. So there was some level of censorship maybe, but in a good way. I never thought or never felt like my words would be completely different to what I tried to say, or my idea would be presented in a completely wrong way. So the idea, of course, was to make it popular as well, and do say that, and girls were supposed to say that Korean is good. And also it has some bad sides. It's on the average good, and I think the show was had to support this idea, and the Koreans worked on that hard. But in terms of actual Koreans, how they did work with us, it was difficult to say, because we were close to script writers because we would laugh together, we would discuss something, but we were not very close to, let's say, guests coming up. We couldn't. They were sitting in a separate room. We were not close to them. We could not ask questions. We would not, as close as we now. For example, you can ask me any question, and I would be, answering you whatever I think of. Those guests, they were quite often stars, and they would be maybe keeping themselves as a star, as a celebrity, and we were just girls. Some of the girls actually became celebrities as well, but majority of us were just regular girls, just students, just employees. So we were, I would say, we were a different group. We were not assimilated in the group of actual Koreans. Does that answer the question? Oh, I can't hear you, Marilyn. I think you may be muted or something. Marilyn, you're muted.
Sorry, I was saying, yeah, that was an extensive answer, I said, and it jives with what my experiences were with Korean TV. They scripted you. But anyway, we can go into that on another session. Does anybody else here have any questions? Valjean, you didn't type anything. Do you have any questions for Maria?
No, I have no question. Thank you for your presentation. Дякую.
Дякую. Yeah. Okay. And Dilnaz, I haven't seen Dilnaz. We haven't seen the face down there, but if there are no further questions, I just want to thank you so much. You poured out your heart and mind and soul, and you poured out your memories, and you put together a very detailed PowerPoint, but it wasn't PowerPoint, but anyway, very detailed, whatever. Presentation, yeah. And you said it was only based on your experience, but you did pull together a lot of research to go into that. So I really want to thank you for all the effort you put into this. And we've got the recording. What is the situation, Professor Ko? Does the recording is going to be available for just 1 week, or it will be continuously available? How will that work?
Well, in general, I made it available for 1 week for public access. But after that, if anyone wants to see it again, then they can contact us, Korean Studies Center, then I will individually share the link. Because some speakers, they don't want to be their videos and speeches, publicly available. So just 1 week is the minimum length. But of course, if Maria agrees, then we can make it public for
now you remember my second degree is cybersecurity, and I try to be loud in cyberspace. So yes, please keep it only available, openly available, just for some times. But I'm okay with some, if people request it to have it for their personal.
Yeah, usually those kind of requests comes from NU students or staff or faculty members, not outside of the NU.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. Yeah.
When the word of mouth spreads about all the information you shared, there may be more requests.
Yeah, I can see we only made it to just a few people, and I didn't realize that many people had to go.
Yeah,
so
some people, they said thank you. There's many thank yous over there. Several people had to leave for, whatever, childcare or whatever other reasons, right?
It was too long. It was 2 hours, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Sorry, my family is speaking in too. They want me back too.
Thank you. 너무 감사합니다. 고마워요.